everybody, how's it going? Today we're going to do a video on replacing the bearings in my Chinese wheel set R13 hubs. I looked online, it took me a while to find any information on them. Well, to be honest with you, there is no information on them. Nobody's really done this to some extent. There was one gentleman on YouTube that does do replacement on an R13 hub, but he speeds up through the entire process of actually removing the bearings and all. We're going to do this with basic tools. I don't have a bearing press. I'm sure if any of you ever thought about doing that and you go and look up a bearing press like I do from time to time because I completely forget, then I realize how mad expensive they are for a bearing press. I'm like, yeah, that's not going to happen. So we're going to go ahead and do this. I will take you through the steps of what I did to do this. I will preface by saying I'm not a professional bike mechanic. I've never worked at a bike shop, but I've been building and working on bikes most of my life. And continue to build bikes and play around with them. So what we're going to work on today is my son's carbon wheels that were from China, and these have Powerway hubs in them, and they are only one season on them, but for whatever reasons the bearings feel terrible. They actually still spin quite nicely. You can spin them and that thing will, this wheel will spin for forever. It'll just keep going and going and going, but there's some vibration in them. So I'm going to go ahead and replace the bearings. This bike here actually has Chinese wheels as well, and they also have the Powerway hubs, but I don't know what the difference is. But these bearings are the originals. They've been in here for 5 seasons now. They still spin like glass, no issues. I did do the rear wheel just recently, about 3 months ago. I did the rear wheel after 5 seasons. And actually, it probably should have been done at 4 seasons. There was a little bit of play in the rear wheel. And again, it spun absolutely smooth. But there was just a little bit of side-to-side play. The bearings were definitely wearing out, and when I pulled them out, actually only one of the 2 inboard bearings wore out. I did replace the carrier for the cassette. I replaced the whole unit at one time instead of popping the bearings out of that. So I kept the old one. I can put the bearings in. Where did I get my bearings from? I just jumped on eBay, and there's a company out there called Hub Doctor. And I'll link this stuff down below once I complete the video. And Hub Doctor actually puts together bearing kits for these Powerway hubs, as well as many other things. I've bought bearings from the Hub Doctor before. I had an old Mavic set of hubs. You know, if you guys ever had that Mavic hub that had the inner bearing was actually a nylon bushing, worst design ever. Not sure how people didn't get fired over that. But anyhow, they make a bearing kit to replace that nylon bushing. So I actually had done that one time on a hub back some time ago. So I'm going to go ahead and brake here, and then I will take you through the steps of popping out the bearings and putting new ones in these Powerway hubs on these Chinese wheels. Hey everyone, welcome back. So a few things to get started in doing this project is that you're going to need 2 5mm Allen keys. So these are 5mm. And you're going to need a block of wood. And we're going to do the rear bearings as well, but for now the front bearings, you're going to need a block of wood, and you're going to want to drill a hole in that block of wood that is approximately 1 inch long. So I use this spade bit right here to drill that hole in there to get it about 1 inch long. Why, you ask? Because we need to be able to knock those bearings out, and we're going to use a rubber mallet to do that. And you want the hub to be able to fit into that hole like so. You want to get in here a little closer. You can kind of see how that fits into the wood. And it's going to allow us to be able to knock that bearing out the other way. And then we'll flip it over and do the same. And then we can put it back together. So I'm going to go ahead and start. And we're going to go ahead and just pull, the end caps off. And actually, you're only going to get one end cap off on this, because there is not a dual setup in there. And I already loosened this ahead of time. And you can see that only one side comes out, right? And you can see the bearing is actually flush in this hub, so it's really easy. But I could tell just by moving my finger in here how much friction there is on that bearing. So it's smooth. There's not another Allen set in here like a lot of hubs have in order to break the other end cap off. So we're going to work with it just the way that it is. And what I'm going to do to knock out that bearing is I'm just going to start to thread this in right here and give it about that much space. So it's in maybe 3 or 4 threads. I'm going to pop it into the hole like so. And I'm just going to hit it real firm. I'm not going to just bang at it a bunch of times. I'm just going to hit it really firm with a rubber mallet. So we'll take a look at that. And there you go. You can see that bearing is almost already all the way popped out. Actually, it is. So I can take and loosen this up. Can you get both sides of that? There we go. Now you can see the ends. This is the axle itself, right? You can see that there's a bearing on this side. So we will have to get that piece out of there to get that bearing out of there, which we'll go ahead and work on. And then this side, I unscrew it. But what we're going to do is we're going to take and we're going to reverse that process to get that bearing out of there. So I'm going to go ahead and break this loose, and we'll go ahead and do that. And I'm going to go ahead and break, and we'll be right back. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just use a pair of common pliers to go ahead and hold this axle still. This part of the axle right here is not doing anything inside of the hub itself, right? So this is just free space. This is an aluminum axle, by the way. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab this and squeeze it pretty tight. And then I'm going to go ahead and just break this other side loose, like so. And that spins off. Just like that. And you can see that bearing is loose. And it actually spins pretty nice, but there's just a little bit of roughness, coarseness in there. But we're going to go ahead and replace those bearings. And I still have to get the bearing out of the other side of this wheel, right? So you can see here that that bearing is still in there. And all I'm going to do that is I'm going to go ahead and reverse what I did on the other side. So we're going to go ahead and put this wheel in like so. I'm going to take and thread in an axle. So I'm going to go ahead and thread in one of these end caps like this, and you can thread it in all the way so we don't damage any of the threads. Right, then I'm going to go ahead and pop that in there. Actually, I do have to back it off a little bit so we can get some play. Maybe I'll flip this around. Yeah, there we go. So I'm going to pop that in there, and again, just hit it just a good smack with the rubber mallet. And we got to go a little bit further. So we'll go ahead and loosen that up a little bit more. There we go. Tap that back out. And there's our other bearing out of there. So now we're just going to go ahead and reverse this procedure, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that in just a second. I will show you this, that I did tell you that I used the hub doctor on eBay to get hubs for this. So this is the packaging that it comes in. It actually has the hubs for the rear, the front, as well as the cassette carrier. And there's the hub doctor's information. And again, I have bought from these guys before. They've been very reliable, and they also have they list all the bearings that you would need for the hub, so I didn't have to search each individual one or try to figure out what bearings are in there, because you don't really know until you take it apart. So it's nice to have them ready and ready to go. So give me a second, we'll go ahead and reverse this procedure, and we'll show you what that looks like. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and pop the front bearings into the hub. Listen, I gotta come clean with you guys. Remember I was telling you about how I ordered the kit from the Hub Doctor, for the R13 hubs, and it came with both the front and the rear. Come to find out, the front bearings they sent were incorrect. So they had sent these here, which are 69-2RS bearings. They are not quite the right size for what I needed here. So the bearings that are the correct size for my hub here, which I'm pretty sure are Powerway R13s, is actually, and I ended up getting these from Amazon, 6800 RS. And of course now I got a pack of 10. So even if they do happen to crap out every, on a pretty consistent basis, at least I'll have some spares to make this adjustment, which is pretty quick, doesn't take that long, so it's not too big a deal. And you can see here that these are, there's the old one, there's the new one. These are the exact same size. So we will go ahead and pop these new ones into place. So let's get started with that. I do like to put a little bit of grease on these. Not a ton, just to protect from corrosion, help them slide in a little easier. And then these were actually flush mount with the hub itself. So I'm just going to use my mallet to tap these in directly. On the rears, you'll see that I'll be using a socket that matches up with them to tap those in. But in this case, we're just going to use a mallet and go ahead and just tap these in. Nice and easy. Don't have to hit them too hard. There we go. That one is in there. It's flush, looks good. And we'll go ahead and flip it over and do the other side. But hey, before you do the other side, don't forget to pop your axle back in there. Right, so we're gonna have to pop the axle back in. What I do wanna do here as well is that, take that off. Sorry, I still have the old bearing on there. So we'll take that off, and I'll remember to grease these up as well. And these were already oiled ahead of time. So we're gonna put the axle in, and I'm actually gonna go ahead and thread this side in ahead of time. So I'm going to flip it around so I can get a better alignment there. There we go. All right, and we'll go ahead and we'll tap that other side in. And the bearing. Throw a little grease on it. Line that up. There we go. Throw a little grease on this. Even though it's already oiled up, we'll throw a little more on there. And get our two 5mm. Actually, I gotta go over and grab my other Allen wrench, so one sec. Got my other Allen wrench here, so we'll go ahead and get this screwed in. Snug them down. Feels pretty good. And that is it. Pop the skewer in, put the front wheel back on, and we're all right. So we got the front wheel done. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to the rear wheel, and I'll show you how that one comes apart, and we'll put it back together. See you in a few. Hey everyone, welcome back. Now that we've gotten the front hub taken care of and put back together, we're gonna go ahead and do the rear hub. Now the rear hub, again, same thing. It's only got one season on it, but there's coarseness in the bearings. They still spin really smooth. This wheel will spin forever, but there's coarseness in it, so they're not gonna last too long. Apparently they use some pretty cheap bearings in here, so we're gonna go ahead and replace those. You are going to need one additional tool. So besides the two 5mm Allens we're going to need to get these end caps off right here, inside to get the other end cap off, we need a 10mm. So we're going to go ahead and get that started now. So I'm going to go ahead and pop these loose, the two 5mm. So one on each side. We'll go ahead and break these loose. All right, so you can see this side came out first. And then if you look, you can actually see right here, that's where your 10 millimeter is going to go, so we can go ahead and break the other side loose. So I'm going to take my 10 millimeter hex right here, pop it in there, and then we can break the other side loose. Maybe. There it goes. There we go. We got our end caps off. We can go ahead and pull this off. There's your carrier right there. On my other set of wheels, which I stated in the beginning of the video, I went ahead and replaced this whole thing this last year. This one actually feels really good. I feel no coarseness in it. There's no play in it. It spins pretty smooth. We'll let it be. We'll see how that holds out. So now we're going to go ahead and knock the bearings out. So I'm going to go ahead and just take a little pause here, and then we'll come back. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to knock the bearings out through this side. One of the things I had to do is when I started to do this a second ago, I was using the block that I had used for the front hub. That's a 1-inch diameter hole. Well, the rear is a slightly different size, so I had to drill that out to 1 1/4 inches. So that is now a bigger size to allow clearance for this piece of the hub right here, right? So that's got to fit inside that hole. Now it does. So now we can go ahead and properly knock out that bearing, and we'll go ahead and we'll do that. As you can see, it drops straight out pretty easily. Doesn't take too much of a whack. There it is. And we have our axle out. And there's our bearing on this side right here. And we can see that that's just sitting on there. Here's our axle from the other side. We just slide that bearing right off of there. This one spins nice, but you can feel the coarseness in it. So that amplifies when it's on your wheel. That amplifies right through the hub, through the spokes to the wheel. You can feel that coarseness, but it actually spins pretty nice. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take and spin this axle around the other way, and we're going to pop that bearing out here from the other side, and that we can just pop that in like this, set it on our block of wood, and we can go ahead and knock that bearing out. Oh, a little bit more. Out it goes. So now we've got our two bearings out of here. That one actually feels good. That bearing's still good. No coarseness, still buttery smooth. We'll keep this one around. You never know when you're going to need a bearing of this size. And we'll go ahead and reverse this procedure and put it back together. I'll be right back. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to get our new bearings put in. Just for reference, I'll go ahead and I'll show you. This is the drive side bearing right there. So you can see what the bearing number is if you do decide to buy them individually instead of the kit. And as you saw from earlier, the kit actually contained the wrong size front hub bearing, so I did have to order those separate. So you can see that didn't work out for us so well buying the kit, but these rear ones are correct. So that is the drive side, and then this one is the non-drive side bearing. And these are the correct size bearings that are going to go into the rear. So let's go ahead and we'll get that started. I've already kind of wiped out the inside of this side right here. You can see it's kind of shiny in there. I am going to go ahead and put just a little layer of grease around the outside of the bearing to a couple of things, kind of help it seat in there a little easier. And then it's also going to go ahead and just offer a little bit of protection so we don't get corrosion between the metal and the aluminum. So just a little layer right along the outside of this to help facilitate that. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to use a socket. So in this case, I've got a 3/4 inch socket that is of a 1/2 inch drive variety. And you can see that it is pretty much flush with the diameter of this. So we're going to use this to help pop this in. And by the way, you want to do the drive side first, because if you remember, the axle sticks up on the drive side quite a bit, right? So this is a little bit different. You do have to tap your way in here. You can't just start banging away. So typically what you want to do is just get it squared as much as you can and tap it in to get it started. So once we start tapping, that will start to drop in there. We want to make sure that it's going in evenly as best as possible, which is not always the easiest. And it's going in. I'll show you guys where I'm at. So it's not all the way in yet, but it's getting there and it's starting to seat. So we'll keep going. And I'm using the back side, so it allows a little more slip and slide. You can see, obviously, I've got a wider edge to work with here, and this is tapered to the middle, so I'm not banging on the middle of this. It is staying to the outside edges. And we're almost there. And I'd say we are just there. That feels pretty flush in there. So you can see that's seated in there pretty flush. Let's give it one more tap. Get rid of the dog hair. So there we go. So we got that side in. So let's go ahead and we will flip it over and do the other side. Now you have to remember, you have to put your axle in, and you want to make sure that you have your axle going in the right side, right? So this needs to be coming up through here. I'm also going to throw a little grease on the inside of that bearing where the axle rides on that. Just again, for protection and allow it to, you know, just to allow it to move more freely and not have wear. You can actually see on this axle, there's like a little bit of wear right there in the aluminum. You know, and that might be a reason why you would want to put just a little layer of grease there to keep that protected. So we'll go ahead and do that. Do some on the other side. And this is actually going to pop in through here, right? Just like that. There we go. So now, remember I have my 2 blocks of wood that have a hole in there. You're gonna need that, right? Because now I have to flip this thing upside down to do the other side. So we're gonna go ahead and put that like that. And we're gonna get our other bearing out. And I have a different socket set up for that. I'm gonna use this socket. So I've got a long socket here. And you can see it's pretty hollowed out, so it'll clear the axle and allow me to go ahead and set this other bearing in there. And again, I'm just going to put a little bit of grease on the outside of the bearing. Squeeze a little bit too much out of the tube on this one. And we'll go ahead while we got it here and just do the inside as well. There we go, set that there. And the same sort of process, just nice and easy. You're not beating the crap out of this on this side, just tapping it to get it started. Nothing too hard. And this one's going right in, really pretty easy. There we go. That one dropped in real nice. So we can go ahead and just kind of test this for play. I don't feel any play. When you tighten it up, it's gonna go ahead and press those in anyways. So that feels really good. Now I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna put a little bit of grease in here where our carrier goes back in. This needs to be very, very light. Do not overpack this because it gets gummed up. And what happens is if you put too much in there and it gets gummed up, then these little pawls no longer bounce back. They're just sitting on a spring. You know, they press in and out. I'll wipe this down here. Yeah, I should probably really take and clean this out and put it in a parts cleaner and all that. But again, it's got one season on it. We're just going to clean it up real quick, put a very light layer of grease back on here. A lot of these carriers actually require nothing more than just a little bit of oil. You know, it all depends on the manufacturer and whatnot. This one definitely had some grease in it. But we'll put a little light layer of grease in there. And then we'll grease up the axle a little bit. We'll pop that in there and get that going. So let me grab some grease. So in this case, I'm going to use a real grease. It's a little bit more slick. So in this case, I'm just using a real bearing grease. The stuff that you saw me use on the bearings themselves, that's a synthetic grease. It's like a molly coat. It's much tackier and a little bit thicker. It offers a little bit more protection. It doesn't break down nearly as readily as this, but it's also not as slick. So again, I don't want anything heavy here. So we're just going to do a very, very light coating of this grease in here. Doesn't really need anything else. We'll go ahead and put some on the inside of this as well. And I'm going to throw a little bit on the axle hub itself, or the axle shaft. And this is the molly coat that I'm using here. Doesn't break down nearly as readily as the other stuff does. Let's see how lucky we get with this. Usually you can kind of just get this to pop in. Not today, so I do have a little trick for this. You can use this. So I've got a zip tie right here. So if I take a zip tie and just kind of squeeze it around this, so it kind of pulls all those in. There you go. So pull my zip tie out, and now we're back in there. Now what we got to do is go ahead and put our end caps back on. So we're going to start with the non-drive side first, because remember we have our 10 millimeter on this side. So we'll pop our 10 millimeter here, and then we're going to go ahead and put our outside cap back on over here. Actually, I'm going to put a little bit of grease on these threads. Everyone, so yeah, we're gonna go ahead and finish putting this back together. One of the things that I missed the first time that I was putting this together is that it was on the ground, is this very little ring right here. This little ring goes on the back side right here, and that keeps this from bottoming out on the hub on the other side. So it keeps it from bottoming out. Because what happened then, it was too tight. So in actuality, I took it back apart, because when I saw this, I'm like, oh, well, that would explain why that's too tight. And we're gonna go ahead and put that back together. So this drops in first on the axle, like so. Then this bad boy goes on. Just moving around a little bit in there. Didn't need my zip tie that time, so that worked. And we'll go ahead and put our end caps back together here. Get our 5 millimeter Allen wrenches. There we go. that up. That's better. I already did a spin on this a minute ago. Nice and smooth, no vibration. Should be good to go. So that is replacing the bearings on Powerway R13 hubs on these Chinese carbon wheels, and doing it with regular tools. So again, do this at your own risk. I'm not a bike mechanic. I just do these things to help save money and make my life easier, and replace parts as needed. And with that, I bid you all a great day. Bye now.